Welcome back to Life Beyond the Ladder, a podcast to help you design a second act you can't wait to live. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, a career strategist and midlife reinvention guide, inviting you to imagine your next chapter today. I want to start today's episode with sort of confessions of a frustrated coach. I am really tired of watching capable women undersell themselves. I used to have a lot more patience and empathy for it, but I'm finding as I get older, I just want to shove them right out of the nest, Most don't undersell themselves because they lack confidence in the usual ways, but because somewhere along the line, most of us learn to lead with our titles, our credentials, our most recent accomplishments, and quietly set aside the things that are most valuable about us. We traded reasonable dignity and self-worth for some misguided hope that others would notice our humility and look harder at our talents. And as you know, they usually don't. But these are the things that took decades to build, the things no one else in the room has. Today, we're claiming those things back. We're not waiting for somebody to notice. We're going to lead with those things. This episode isn't a pep talk about believing in yourself. It's a direct, honest look at why it's time to stop treating them like footnotes and start treating them like the headline. Let's start with what time actually builds. And I mean specifically, not in the vague experience as valuable way we've all heard before, but in concrete, specific terms that you can point to. The first asset is perspective. Perspective sounds soft until you realize how rare it actually is. Perspective is the ability to look at a situation or a problem or a conflict or decision and see it in context. To know that this crisis isn't the first crisis. To know that this pattern has appeared before and here's roughly how it ends. To know the difference between what's urgent and what actually matters in the long run. You cannot buy perspective. You can't download it. You can't teach it in a weekend workshop. It's built exclusively through enough situations, cycles, enough good outcomes and bad ones that your brain has developed a library that no 28-year-old has access to yet. That library is yours, and it's extraordinarily valuable. The second asset is pattern recognition. And when you think about it, pattern recognition is really perspective in action. It's the ability to look at something new and know, sometimes before you can fully articulate why, that you've seen this before, that this client reminds you of the last client who behaved this way, or this organizational dynamic is the one that always leads here, that this decision, which looks complicated, actually has a clear answer once you strip away the noise. Women with 30 years of professional experience have pattern libraries that are genuinely remarkable. And most of us don't mention them because they're hard to put on a resume. They show up in what looks like intuition, in what looks like good judgment. They show up in the ability to walk into a room, read it in 10 seconds, and know exactly what it needs. It's not magic. That's decades of data, processed and refined and sharpened through use. And the third asset is relational depth, the ability to build trust, not transactional relationships, but genuine ones. The ability to navigate complexity between people without making it worse. The ability to hold space for someone who's struggling without rushing to fix them or distance yourself from their difficulty. These skills are built through having had hard conversations, through having been the person that people turn to, through having navigated conflict and loss, celebration and change alongside other human beings over many years. They're not teachable in any meaningful way. They're earned. And in a world that is increasingly transactional and digital and fast, they're more valuable than ever. So now let's talk about the resume problem, because most of us have been unconsciously editing our value down to fit a template that was never designed for someone like us. The resume, in its traditional form, rewards recency and titles. Most recent job first, most impressive credential, or most prominent. Everything else has supporting evidence. And what that template tends to bury systematically every time is exactly the kind of thing we've been talking about. The wisdom that came from navigating the merger no one else wanted to touch. The institutional knowledge that kept 3 projects from going off the rails. The relationships that opened doors that credentials alone would never have opened. The judgment that prevented a mistake that would have cost the company millions. None of that fits neatly into a bullet point, so we leave it out. And then we wonder why people underestimate us. I want you to think about something. What's the thing that you know cold that you've quietly stopped mentioning? Not because it isn't valuable, but because somewhere along the way you decided it wasn't the kind of thing you could lead with. The thing that you could teach a masterclass on. The hard-won insight that took you a decade or more to develop, and that you now apply so naturally, you've forgotten that it's extraordinary. That thing. That's what I want us to put back on the table. So let's talk about the phrase, I've done this before, because really that's where all this comes from. It's because you've done something before or seen something before. Because for a lot of women at this stage of life and career, that phrase has started to feel like a liability. You may have even been punished for it. Like it signals that you're behind the times, or it marks you as someone living off old accomplishments rather than building new ones. I want to completely reframe that. I've done this before is not a stale credential. It's a competitive advantage. When someone has done the thing before, really done it, not read about it, not been adjacent to it, but actually lived it, they bring something to the table that no amount of enthusiasm or intelligence can replicate. They know what it actually costs. They know the parts that look easy, but aren't. They know where the friction will come from and how to manage it before it becomes a crisis. They know what success actually looks and feels like from the inside, which means they can recognize it in real time and protect it. I've done this before is not something to apologize for. It's something to lead with. And if you're in a room or a conversation or an interview or in a relationship where I've done this before is being treated as a disadvantage, well, that room is wrong. So now let's spend a moment on what becomes possible when you stop apologizing for your years. Because I think this is where change really happens. Most of us have absorbed a culture or a cultural message, we'll say, so deeply and so early on that we barely even notice it anymore. And that message is that youth equals value, that newness equals relevance, almost like exclusively that newness or youth equals relevance, that the most desirable thing you can be in almost any professional context is someone with potential. And somewhere in our 40s or 50s, we start to feel the weight of that message. We start to hedge and we start to qualify, to frame our experience as if it might be a little too much, a little too old, a little too last decade. And in doing that, we make the argument for the people who were going to undervalue us anyway, like we do it for them. So stop making that argument. You're not too much. You are not too experienced. You're not someone whose best years are behind her. You are someone who's spent decades building exactly the kind of asset that is most needed and least common. And the moment you start presenting yourself that way, everything changes. Not because the world suddenly becomes more equitable, because it won't, but because you stopped colluding with the story that says you're less than you are. So here's what I want you to do before our next conversation. And even if you only have 5 minutes, try this. Make a list, not a resume, not asking you to write your whole resume over again, but just make a real list of the things that you know cold. Just jot them down, topic by topic, or skill by skill. Okay. These are the things you've developed that feel ordinary to you now, but they only feel ordinary because you've been living inside them for so long. The insights that took years to learn, the hard won wisdom you stopped mentioning because you assumed everyone already knew it or everyone else already had it. So write it all down, all of it, because in your second act, you're not starting over. You're starting from further ahead than you've ever given yourself credit for. So it's time to start acting like that, because if we don't lead with our experience and our confidence about our experience, then no one else is going to feel confident about it, respect it, or want us to lead with it. So we have to do that. You can still be open to all the new information and ideas. You continue to build perspective always, but we're going to stop apologizing for the experience we have. We're going to stop staying silent along the sides of the conference room while people make mistakes right in front of us and we allow it because they lack the perspective that we have. All right. So we're not going to hide it. We're going to put it right back out on the table and lead with it. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, and this is Life Beyond the Ladder. Stay tuned next week for details on my upcoming Vine and Vision retreat in Paso Robles, California, and I will see you again soon.